Hey guys, imagine spending your entire working day elbow deep in a dead body that's been sitting in the heat for a week, scraping out organs with a bronze hook while the stench clings to your skin like a second layer of clothing. Your hands are slippery with mystery fluids, your back aches from hunching over stone tables all day, and the workshop smells like a fish market forgot about a delivery for 3 months straight. You're not a doctor. You're not a priest performing sacred rites in peaceful temples. You're a mummy maker in ancient Egypt, and your job is to turn rotting corpses into preserved packages for eternity while fighting off flies the size of grapes. If you think your job is rough, try doing this without gloves, running water, or even a proper face covering. It's disgusting, it's exhausting, and it would break most modern people before lunch on day one. If you're enjoying this already, smash that like button and subscribe for more historical suffering. I'm genuinely curious to know where you're watching from, so tell me in the comments what country you're in and what time it is right now. So let's step into the world of an ancient Egypt mummy maker and see exactly why you wouldn't last a single week. Your morning starts before the sun comes up, which sounds peaceful until you remember that ancient Egypt doesn't have alarm clocks, so you're getting woken by a colleague banging on your door or shouting through the window. No gentle chime, no snooze button, just someone yelling that the bodies won't prep themselves. You roll off your sleeping mat, which is basically a thin piece of linen over hard mud brick, and your hip bones already feel bruised from a night of zero cushioning. Your neck has a crick in it that won't shift for hours. You stumble outside into the pre-dawn darkness, and the air already smells faintly salty and stale, because your workshop is downwind from the embalming tables, and the smell never really goes away. It's baked into the walls. You splash some water on your face from a clay jar that's been sitting out overnight, so it's got a slightly stagnant taste, and a few dead insects floating on top. Refreshing. You're not even awake yet, and you're already regretting every life choice that brought you here. Breakfast is a chunk of bread that's so hard you have to dunk it in beer just to make it chewable. Not the cold, refreshing beer you're imagining. This is warm, thick, slightly sour beer that tastes like someone dissolved old bread in water and left it in the sun. It's nutritious, sure, but it's also got bits floating in it that you try not to think about. You're eating this while walking to the workshop because there's no time to sit down and enjoy a meal like a normal human being. The bread scrapes the roof of your mouth because even soaked, it's got the texture of damp cardboard. Your teeth are already wearing down from years of this diet, and you're only in your 20s. The grit from stone-ground flour gets into everything. Every bite crunches in a way that makes you wince. You swallow it down with more of that beer and try to wake up your brain for the day ahead, which is going to be 8 hours of physical labor and sensory assault that would make a modern person weep. The workshop is a large open-air structure with a roof to keep the sun off, but no walls, because walls would trap the smell and probably kill everyone inside within a week. The tables are stone slabs, waist-high, worn smooth from years of use. They're stained a colour that's hard to describe, but easy to imagine. The floor is packed, earth mixed with sand, and it's got dark patches where fluids have soaked in over time. You try not to look at those too closely. There are jars everywhere, big ceramic vessels filled with natron salt, linen wrappings, resin, oils and various powders and mixtures that you've memorized by smell because half of them aren't labeled. The whole place has a permanent haze of incense smoke because the priests insist on burning it constantly to purify the space. But really, it just mixes with the other smells and creates a layered stench that coats the back of your throat. You can taste it when you breathe through your mouth. It's like standing in a temple that's also a butcher's shop that's also been left to bake in the sun. Your first task of the day is to check the bodies that are currently in the drying phase. These have been packed in natron salt for the past 40 days, and your job is to brush off the excess and see how they're progressing. Natron is a type of salt that sucks all the moisture out of organic material, and it works brilliantly, but it also means you're basically standing in a cloud of salty dust for 20 minutes while you sweep it off with a stiff brush. It gets in your eyes, it gets up your nose, it coats your lips and makes them crack and sting. You're inhaling tiny particles of salt mixed with, let's be honest, tiny particles of what used to be a person. Every breath tastes chalky and bitter. Your eyes water constantly, and you can't rub them because your hands are covered in the same dust. By the time you're done, your forearms are caked white, your tunic looks like you've been rolling in a flour sack, and your throat feels like you've been eating sand. You hack and cough and spit, trying to clear it, but the taste lingers for hours. Once the natron is cleared away, you have to inspect the body to make sure it's dried properly. This means touching it. The skin is papery and stiff, stretched tight over bones, and it makes a faint crinkle sound when you press on it. It's not scary exactly, but it's deeply weird. The texture is like old leather that's been left in an attic for decades. You're checking for soft spots, areas where moisture might still be trapped, because if you wrap it up too early, the whole thing could go bad during the final stages, and then you're in serious trouble with the client's family, not to mention the priests. You run your hands over the torso, the limbs, feeling for any give. It's cold, even in the Egyptian heat, because there's no life in it. Your fingertips go slightly numb from the sensation. You've done this 100 times, but it never stops being uncomfortable. Every time you do it, there's a little voice in your head reminding you that this used to be a person who walked and talked and probably complained about their own terrible job. Next comes the oiling phase, which sounds luxurious until you realize you're rubbing perfumed oils and resin onto a dried corpse in the blazing morning heat. The oils are thick and sticky, and they smell sweet in a way that's almost cloying, like flowers that have gone just slightly off. You're supposed to massage them into the skin to make it supple again and give it a lifelike appearance, which is a polite way of saying you're trying to make a piece of preserved leather look like a person. The resin is worse. It's heated, so it's pourable, and the scent is overwhelming, sharp and piney, and so strong it makes your head swim. You drizzle it over the body and work it in with your hands, and within minutes your palms are black and sticky. This stuff does not come off easily. You'll be scraping it out from under your fingernails for days. It gets on your tunic, in your hair, all over your forearms. By midday, you look and smell like you've been wrestling with a pine tree that's also a candle. The heat makes everything worse. The oils go runny and drip everywhere. The resin cools on your skin and hardens into little annoying lumps that you have to pick off one by one. Midway through the morning, a new body arrives. This one is fresh, which is a relative term, because it's been dead for at least 3 days, and it's been sitting in someone's house while the family made arrangements. It arrives wrapped in linen and loaded onto a wooden sledge, dragged by 2 very tired-looking adult workers who are probably grateful to hand it over and leave. You and your colleagues unwrap it carefully because the family will want the linen back, and the smell that wafts out is immediate and aggressive. It's the smell of rot, thick and meaty and sweet in the worst way, like fruit gone bad mixed with old meat left out in the heat. It fills the workshop in seconds. Everyone grimaces, but nobody complains because this is just part of the job. You've all smelled worse. The body is bloated in places, the skin discoloured, and there are flies already buzzing around it, even though it's only been uncovered for 30 seconds. You wave them away, but they're persistent little monsters. They land on your arms, your neck, your face. One flies into your ear, and you have to shake your head violently to get it out. Welcome to another day at the office. By midday, the sun is directly overhead and the heat is unbearable. The workshop roof provides some shade, but it's still like working inside an oven that someone forgot to turn off. The stone tables are hot to the touch. The air shimmers. You're sweating from every possible place on your body, and the sweat mixes with the resin and oil and natron dust on your skin to form a grimy paste that itches like mad. Your tunic is soaked through and clinging to your back. It chafes under your arms and around your neck with every movement. You've got a rash developing where the fabric rubs, and it stings every time you shift position. There's no airflow, just thick, dead heat pressing down on you like a heavy blanket made of fire. You're supposed to drink water regularly to avoid collapsing, but the water jug is on the other side of the workshop, and your hands are too filthy to touch it without contaminating the whole thing. So you just suffer and wait for a break that might not come for another hour. The priests show up around noon to check on progress and perform some blessings. They're dressed in clean white linen that's been freshly washed and pressed, and they smell like incense and flowers, which would be nice, except it's a jarring contrast to the state you're in. You're covered in stains and dust and questionable fluids, and they're gliding around looking serene and untouchable. They inspect your work, nodding approvingly or frowning if something isn't up to standard. One of them leans in close to examine the wrapping on a finished mummy, and you can smell the pleasant oils in his hair and the faint scent of fresh bread on his breath, which just makes you more aware of how badly you reek. You smell like a combination of dead fish, old socks, and a spice market that caught fire. The priest wrinkles his nose slightly but says nothing. Professional courtesy. He mutters a prayer, waves some incense around and leaves. You watch him go and fantasize briefly about having a job where you stay clean for more than 10 minutes at a time. Lunch is another round of bread, this time with some onions and a small portion of dried fish. You eat it sitting on the ground in the shade, too tired to care that your hands are still dirty. You try to brush off the worst of the residue, but it's pointless. Everything you touch tastes faintly of salt and resin. The dried fish is so tough you have to tear it with your teeth, and it's salty enough to make your eyes water. The onions are at least fresh, crunchy and sharp, and they cut through the lingering taste of everything else. You chew slowly, giving your jaw a workout, and watch a line of ants march past carrying crumbs. One of your colleagues is complaining about his knees, another is picking resin out of his beard. This is the glamorous world of ancient Egyptian craftsmanship. You're all sitting in the dirt, eating food that barely qualifies as food, covered in substances you'd rather not think about, and you still have half a day's work ahead of you. After lunch, you move on to the wrapping phase, which is delicate, tedious, and absolutely critical. The linen has to be wrapped in a specific way, with prayers and amulets inserted at specific points, and if you mess it up, the whole thing is ruined and you're wasting expensive materials. The linen strips are long and narrow, and they've been soaked in resin to make them stick. This means they're sticky, stiff, and awkward to handle. You start with the fingers, wrapping each one individually, which requires patience and a steady hand. Your fingers are already sore from the morning's work, and now you're performing fiddly precision tasks with hands that feel like swollen sausages. The resin sticks to your skin as much as it sticks to the linen. You're constantly peeling bits of fabric off your palms and trying again. It's like trying to wrap a present while wearing oven mitts made of glue. The body has to be positioned just right before you start the main wrapping. Arms crossed over the chest, legs straight and together, head facing the right direction. You and a colleague lift it carefully and adjust it on the table. It's stiff and awkward, like moving a wooden plank that used to be a person. You prop it up, shift it slightly, check the alignment. Your colleague grunts with effort. His face is red from the heat and the strain. You lower the body back down and start wrapping the torso, winding the linen around and around in overlapping layers. It takes forever. Your arms are aching from holding them up and keeping tension on the fabric. The resin smell is overpowering because you're working with it up close for an extended period. Your head starts to throb. You blink sweat out of your eyes and keep going. There's a rhythm to it, almost meditative, but your body is screaming at you to stop. Every few layers you have to insert an amulet or a small charm, tucked between the wrappings at a specific location. These are meant to protect the deceased in the afterlife, and the priests have given you very detailed instructions about where each one goes. Heart scarab over the chest, protective symbol near the throat, another one by the feet. You're trying to remember the list, while also keeping the tension even on the linen, and it's a lot to juggle mentally. You place an amulet, wrap over it, smooth it down, keep going. Your fingers are cramping, the muscles in your forearms are burning. You're only halfway done with this body, and it's already mid-afternoon. The sun has shifted, and now it's shining directly into the workshop at an angle that's somehow even more brutal than before. The glare is blinding. You squint and keep wrapping because stopping isn't an option. One of the other workers accidentally drops a jar of oil, and it smashes on the stone floor with a crash that makes everyone jump. Oil spreads across the ground in a slick puddle, and the smell of it fills the air, sharp and herbal. He curses, grabs a cloth and starts trying to soak it up, but oil and sand make a horrible paste that just smears around. The floor is now slippery in that spot, which is a disaster waiting to happen because everyone is walking around carrying heavy jars and bodies and tools. Someone's going to slip and break something. You make a mental note to avoid that area and continue with your wrapping. The mishap has thrown off the rhythm of the whole workshop. People are muttering, distracted. The smell of spilled oil is competing with all the other smells, and somehow making everything worse. It's like the air has become thicker, harder to breathe. You focus on your hands, on the linen, on the task, one loop at a time. Don't think about how many more you have to do. By late afternoon, your back is in agony. You've been hunched over tables all day, bending and reaching and twisting, and your spine feels like it's been replaced with a column of hot gravel. Every time you straighten up, something cracks. Your shoulders are knotted with tension. You roll your neck and hear a series of pops that would horrify a modern chiropractor. There's no ergonomic furniture here. No supportive chairs, no adjustable tables, no footrests. Just stone slabs at a fixed height, and your body's job is to adapt or suffer. You're suffering. Your lower back has a deep, throbbing ache that radiates down into your hips. You shift your weight from foot to foot, but it doesn't help. Standing all day on a hard floor in sandals with zero arch support is destroying your feet. Your heels are bruised, the balls of your feet burn. You've got blisters forming between your toes where the sandal straps rub. This is the kind of pain that modern people would take a sick day for. You're expected to just push through. Your house is a small, boxy structure made of mud brick with a flat roof and a single door. There are no windows, just some small vents near the ceiling to let out smoke and let in a tiny bit of airflow. You push the door open and step into the dim interior, and the first thing that hits you is the stuffiness. The air inside is hot and stale, like breathing in a closed cupboard that's been sitting in the sun all day. There's a faint smell of old cooking oil and dust. The floor is packed earth, uneven and gritty under your sore feet. You've got a sleeping mat rolled up in one corner, a low table, a couple of stools, and some storage jars for food and water. That's it. No decorations, no comforts, no personal touches. just the bare minimum to keep you alive. You're too exhausted to care that it's depressing. You drop onto a stool and let out a long, shaky breath. Your legs are trembling from the effort of standing all day. Your feet throb in time with your heartbeat. Dinner is more bread, because bread is the foundation of every meal and you're heartily sick of it. This loaf is a day old and rock hard, so you tear off chunks and dip them in some lentil stew that's been simmering over a small fire outside. The stew is thin and under-seasoned, mostly just lentils and water with a bit of onion and salt. But it's warm and it's food and your body needs it desperately. You shovel it down, barely tasting it, focused only on getting calories into your system so you don't faint. The lentils are mushy and bland. The bread scrapes your already raw throat on the way down. You wash it down with more of that warm, thick beer, and your stomach gurgles in protest, but accepts it. You're so hungry that you'd eat almost anything at this point. Your body is running on empty after a day of hard physical labor in brutal heat, and it's demanding fuel in the form of carbs and more carbs. After eating, you're faced with the grim task of trying to get clean. There's no bathroom, no running water, no shower. What you have is a clay basin and a jug of water that you filled from the communal well this morning. The water has been sitting all day and it's got a slightly swampy taste. Plus, there are a few dead insects floating on the surface that you have to fish out with your fingers. You strip off your filthy tunic and stand in the basin, pouring water over yourself with a smaller cup. It's cold, which is shocking after the heat of the day, and you gasp as it hits your skin. You scrub yourself with a mixture of sand and some kind of plant-based soap that doesn't lather much and smells faintly of ashes. It's abrasive, and it stings the raw patches on your skin, but it gets the job done. Sort of. The resin doesn't want to come off. You scrub harder, and your skin goes red and angry. The natron dust has dried in crusty patches on your arms, and you have to scrape it off with your fingernails. It flakes away like old sunburn. Your hair is a disaster. It's full of dust and resin, and it smells like the workshop. You pour water over your head and try to work your fingers through it, but it's matted and tangled. You don't have conditioner or a proper comb, just a wooden tool with widely spaced teeth that catches and pulls. You yank at the tangles, wincing, and manage to get it somewhat under control. Little bits of debris fall out, a flake of resin, some chaff, something unidentifiable. You give up before it's fully clean because your arms are too tired to keep working at it. Good enough. You're not trying to impress anyone. You towel off with a rough piece of linen that's scratchy and worn thin, and you pull on a clean tunic that's only slightly less ragged than the one you were wearing. Clean is a relative term. It's been washed, but the stains from previous work days never fully came out. There are yellowish patches and dark smudges that are permanent. You smell better than you did, but you still carry a faint whiff of the workshop that soap and water can't entirely erase. Sleep should come easily because you're exhausted, but your body has other ideas. You lie down on your mat, which is thin and lumpy and does nothing to cushion the hard floor beneath. Your bruised hip bones press into the ground. You shift, trying to find a comfortable position, but there isn't one. Your back aches. Your shoulders are stiff. Your feet are swollen and tender. Every part of you hurts in a different way, and they're all competing for your attention. You lie on your side. Your hip complains. You roll onto your back. Your spine protests. You try your stomach. Your neck cramps. There's no winning. The heat of the day has soaked into the walls and floor, and even though it's night, the house is still warm and airless. You're sweating again, just from lying still. A mosquito buzzes near your ear, high-pitched and infuriating. You swat at it and miss. It circles and lands on your arm. You slap it and feel the tiny wet smear. Now you're itchy. You scratch, and it makes it worse. You finally drift off into a fitful sleep and you dream about work. You're wrapping a body that keeps moving, shifting every time you turn away, and you can't get the linen to stay in place. You're frustrated and panicking, and the priests are watching and frowning, and you know you're about to be fired. You wake with a start, heart pounding, and realize it's still dark. You've only been asleep for a few hours. Your body is stiff from lying in one position too long. You shift, groan, and close your eyes again. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by discomfort and strange dreams and the sounds of the neighborhood. A dog barking, someone coughing, the distant cry of a baby, footsteps on the street outside. You never get deep, restful sleep. You just pass through shallow layers of unconsciousness until someone is banging on your door again and shouting that it's time to get up. The cycle begins again. The next day is exactly the same as the one before. Same early start, same terrible breakfast, same walk to the workshop, same smells and stains and physical misery. The work is relentless and repetitive. You're processing bodies in various stages, purifying new arrivals, checking on ones in the natron, wrapping ones that are ready, touching up ones that are nearly finished. It's an assembly line of death and preservation, and you're one cog in the machine. Your hands move on autopilot. Scrub, salt, oil, wrap, repeat. Your brain switches off, because if you think too hard about what you're doing, it becomes unbearable. You're elbow deep in a corpse before the sun is fully up. You're wrapping linen around a dried-out torso while eating your lunch with your other hand. You're scrubbing resin off your arms while discussing dinner plans with a colleague. It's surreal and disgusting and completely normal. This is your life. The pay is not great. You earn enough to keep yourself fed and housed, but there's no extra for luxuries. No fancy clothes, no jewelry, no nights out drinking good wine. You can afford bread and beer and lentils and the occasional bit of fish or onion. That's it. You're not poor, but you're not comfortable. You're surviving. The promise is that if you do this job well for long enough, you'll be respected in the community, and maybe you'll get to work on the body of someone important, which comes with bonuses. But right now, you're working on farmers and minor officials, and people whose families saved up for years to afford even a basic mummification. The process is the same regardless of the person's status, but the materials vary. Rich clients get expensive oils and fine linen and fancy amulets. Poor clients get basic salt and coarse fabric and generic charms. You treat them all the same because it's your job and because, honestly, once someone is dead, they all look pretty similar after a few days. The workshop has a strict hierarchy that nobody talks about, but everyone understands. The senior mummy makers get the easier tasks and the important clients. They do the final inspections and the decorative work and the interactions with priests and families. They've earned that position through years of experience and suffering, and they're not about to give it up. You're somewhere in the middle, experienced enough to be trusted with full bodies, but not senior enough to avoid the worst jobs. The newest workers get stuck with the grunt work, hauling water, cleaning tables, grinding natron, preparing linen, and assisting with the messy early stages. They're the ones who end up covered in the worst fluids and doing the jobs that make everyone else gag. You did that for years, and now you're doing slightly less awful work, but you're still far from the top. The senior workers sit in the shade during breaks while you're still scrubbing tables. They drink the good beer while you get the dregs. It's not fair, but fairness isn't part of the equation. You put in your time and eventually you'll move up. Maybe. One of the worst regular tasks is dealing with bodies that have gone wrong. Sometimes a family waits too long before bringing in their deceased, or the body was stored improperly, and by the time it reaches you, it's in bad shape. Really bad shape. The decomposition is advanced, the smell is catastrophic, and the whole thing is a nightmare to work with. You still have to do it though, because the family has paid and they're expecting a mummy. You approach these jobs with dread and a cloth tied over your nose and mouth, which helps approximately not at all. The smell penetrates fabric like it's not even there. It's thick and meaty and sweet and rotten, a combination that makes your stomach flip. You've thrown up more than once, usually early in your career, but even now your body threatens to rebel. You swallow hard, breathe through your mouth, and get to work. The purification stage is a disaster. The washing just spreads the smell around. The natron has to work overtime, and even then you're not sure it's going to fully dry in the allotted time. You pack it in extra salt, say a quiet prayer to whatever gods might be listening, and hope for the best. The removal of organs from a badly decomposed body is an experience that words can't fully capture. Everything is softer, more fragile, more liquid than it should be. Your hand goes in, and the textures are all wrong. Things fall apart as you try to extract them. You're working blind, by touch, trying to be careful, but also just wanting it to be over as quickly as possible. You pull out something that might be a liver, or might be part of something else, and you drop it in the jar and move on. You're not thinking. You put your mind somewhere else entirely, somewhere far away from this table and this task. You're imagining yourself at the river, swimming in cool water, or sitting under a tree eating figs, or literally anywhere but here. Your body is doing the work on muscle memory, while your consciousness has fled. It's the only way to cope. When it's finally done, you scrub your hands and arms until they're raw, but the feeling lingers. The sense memory of what you just touched stays with you for hours, sometimes days. You'll be lying in bed that night and suddenly remember the texture, and your skin will crawl. The clients themselves are another source of stress. Families come to check on progress, to make special requests, to complain about costs. They're grieving, which makes them emotional and unpredictable. Some cry, some shout, some just stare at you with hollow eyes and ask if their loved one will really live forever. You've learned to be patient and deferential, to nod and reassure and promise that yes, everything is being done properly. Yes, the gods will be pleased. Yes, their family member will reach the afterlife safely. You don't mention the flies or the smell or the fact that you're basically turning their beloved relative into a preserved meat product. You focus on the spiritual side, the eternity side, the comforting lies that make people feel better. It's part of the job. You're not just a craftsman, you're also a counselor and a priest's assistant and a customer service representative. You have to manage expectations and emotions while also managing the very physical, very disgusting reality of your actual work. Sometimes a family can't afford the full treatment and they ask for the budget version. This is even more depressing. The budget version skips a lot of steps. No removal of organs, just a purge using some unpleasant substances inserted from below. No expensive oils, just basic salt. No fine linen, just rough cloth. No decorative mask, just a simple wrapping. It's functional, but it's not dignified. You do your best to make it respectful, but there's only so much you can do with limited materials. The body still gets dried and wrapped, but it's a stripped-down version of the process, and everyone knows it. The family knows they're getting the cheap option, and they're embarrassed, but it's all they can afford. You treat it with the same care as a full-price job because it's the right thing to do, but inside you're sad for them. Death shouldn't have a budget tier, but it does. Everything has a price, even eternity. The weather makes everything harder. In the summer, the heat is relentless and oppressive. You're working in temperatures that would shut down a modern office, and there's no air conditioning, no fans, no ice. Just you and the sun and the overpowering smell of hot decay and resin. You drink water constantly, but you're sweating it out faster than you can replace it. You get headaches from dehydration. Your vision goes spotty. You feel dizzy and nauseous, but you keep working because stopping means falling behind. In the winter, it's cold, especially at night and early in the morning. The stone tables are icy to the touch. Your fingers go numb. The oils and resins thicken in the cold and become harder to work with. You have to warm them over a fire, which takes time and adds another task to your list. The bodies are stiff and cold, even colder than usual, and handling them makes your hands ache. There's no good season for this job. It's always too hot or too cold, and you're always uncomfortable. The tools need constant maintenance. Bronze blades dull quickly and have to be sharpened on a stone, which is a tedious process that eats into your already limited time. You sit there scraping the blade back and forth, checking the edge, scraping some more. Your arm gets tired. The sound is a repetitive rasp that sets your teeth on edge. The stone itself wears down and develops grooves, and eventually it has to be replaced, which costs money that comes out of the workshop's budget, which means everyone gets grumpy about wasted resources. Hooks get bent and have to be straightened or replaced. Jars crack and have to be patched or discarded. Linen gets torn and has to be mended. Everything wears out, and everything has to be maintained, and it's always your job to do it, because the senior workers have better things to do. You're fixing a cracked jar with a paste made from plant resin and crushed stone, and it's fiddly and frustrating, and it's going to break again in a week, but you do it anyway, because that's the job. The social life of a mummy maker is limited and strange. After work, you're too tired to do much. You eat, you wash, you sleep. Maybe you sit outside for a bit and talk with your neighbours, but even that feels like effort. Your neighbours are polite but distant. They know what you do, and it makes them uncomfortable. They don't invite you to gatherings. Their children are told not to bother you. You're respected in a theoretical sense, but avoided in a practical one. It's lonely. Your main social circle is your co-workers, and even then you're all so exhausted that conversation is minimal. You grunt at each other in the mornings. You share tools and work in parallel silence. You make brief comments about the task at hand. That's about it. Deep friendships are hard to form when you're all just trying to survive the day. There's a tavern near the workshop where workers sometimes gather after dark, and it's as depressing as you'd expect. It's a low-ceilinged room with a dirt floor and a few rough benches. The beer is cheap and sour. The food is stale bread, and whatever scraps the owner managed to get that day. Everyone smells bad and looks worse. You sit there nursing your drink, too tired to talk, listening to someone complain about their aching joints or a difficult client. Someone else is half asleep on the bench, snoring softly. Another person is staring into space with a blank expression of someone whose mind has simply given up for the day. This is entertainment. This is your social life. You drink your beer, you listen to the complaints, and then you stagger home and do it all again tomorrow. There are festivals and holidays throughout the year, and technically you get to participate, but in reality you're usually too exhausted, or you have work that can't be delayed. Bodies don't stop coming just because there's a celebration happening. You hear the music and laughter from a distance while you're wrapping a corpse in hot sticky linen. You smell the festival food cooking while you're scrubbing natron off your arms. You see people dressed in their best clothes, dancing and drinking, and you're covered in stains and resin, and too tired to care. Once in a while you get an actual day off because there's a major religious event, and even the dead have to wait, and on those days you mostly just sleep. You sleep for 12 or 14 hours straight, your body desperately trying to recover from weeks of accumulated exhaustion. When you wake up, you're stiff and disoriented, and you've wasted your precious free time unconscious. But your body needed it more than you needed fun. The hierarchy extends beyond the workshop. In the wider community, you're somewhere in the middle of the social ladder. You're above labourers and farmers, but well below scribes, priests and government officials. You have a skilled trade which gives you some status, but the nature of that trade makes people uncomfortable. You're not invited to fancy events. You don't hobnob with the elite. You exist in a sort of professional limbo, necessary but not celebrated. The irony is that everyone will need your services eventually, but nobody wants to think about it. You're like a reminder of mortality, walking around smelling like the inevitable end. People thank you politely and then avoid eye contact. It's isolating in a way that's hard to explain. You're surrounded by people but fundamentally alone. Marriage is complicated. Finding a partner when you smell like a mummification workshop and work brutal hours is not easy. Most people want nothing to do with you. The few who are willing to overlook the job are usually in similarly undesirable positions. Other workers in death-adjacent trades, widows, people with no other options. Romance is not part of the equation. It's a practical arrangement. You need someone to cook and maintain the household. They need financial security. You make it work, but it's not a love story. Your partner complains about the smell. You're too tired to help with household tasks. You argue about money and time, and the fact that you're never around. If you have a family, you barely see them. You leave before dawn and come home after dark. Your children grow up with a father who's always exhausted and always smells strange. It's not the life anyone dreams of. The religious aspect of the work is supposed to be meaningful. You're helping people achieve eternal life, which is a big deal in ancient Egyptian culture. You're performing a sacred service. In practice, though, it's hard to feel spiritual when you're scraping dried flesh off a stone table. The priests talk about the journey to the afterlife and the importance of preserving the body so the soul has a place to return to, and intellectually you understand that, but emotionally you're just trying not to gag. You mutter the required prayers while wrapping linen, but you're thinking about how your back hurts and whether there's any beer left at home. The sacred and the mundane are so mixed together that they become indistinguishable. You're performing holy work with filthy hands, and the contradiction doesn't escape you. There's a constant fear of making a mistake that will have spiritual consequences. If you mess up the mummification, the deceased might not make it to the afterlife. Their soul could be lost or destroyed. That's a huge responsibility, and it weighs on you. You're not just ruining a product, you're potentially damaging someone's eternal existence. The priests emphasize this constantly. Every step has to be done correctly. Every prayer has to be said. Every amulet has to be placed exactly right. The pressure is immense. You have nightmares about discovering a mistake weeks later, about a family cursing you, about angry spirits coming back to haunt you. You double-check everything, but doubt still creeps in. Did you say that prayer? Did you place that charm on the right side? You're pretty sure you did, but what if you didn't? The anxiety is exhausting. The physical toll accumulates over time. Your body is breaking down from years of hard labor. Your back is permanently damaged. Your hands are arthritic. Your feet are a mess of calluses and deformities from bad footwear and standing all day. Your lungs are probably not great from inhaling salt dust and resin fumes for years. You cough a lot, especially in the mornings. You spit up grey mucus that tastes metallic. You wheeze when you exert yourself. You're in your 30s, but you feel 60. The older workers are bent and slow, moving carefully because their bodies are failing. That's your future. There's no retirement plan. You work until you physically can't anymore, and then you hope your family or the community will take care of you. If not, well, things get grim quickly. You've seen old workers begging in the streets, too broken to work but with no other support. It's a terrifying preview of what's coming. The contrast between the theory and reality of the job is stark. In theory, you're a skilled artisan performing sacred work for the benefit of the community. In reality, you're a manual labourer doing disgusting tasks in brutal conditions for barely enough money to survive. The prestige is theoretical. The suffering is very real. You're told you should be proud of your work, and in some distant corner of your mind you are, but mostly you're just tired and sore and wishing you'd learned a different trade. Anything else? Carpentry, pottery, farming, literally anything that doesn't involve spending all day with corpses in the heat. But it's too late now. You're too specialised, too old to start over, too embedded in this life. This is what you do. This is who you are. You're a mummy maker, and you're stuck with it. The materials you work with are expensive and tightly controlled, which adds another layer of stress. Every drop of oil, every strip of linen, every pinch of incense is accounted for. The workshop overseer keeps meticulous records, and if supplies go missing or are wasted, it comes out of someone's wages, usually yours. You have to be incredibly careful not to spill anything, not to tear the linen, not to use more resin than necessary. You're constantly calculating in your head, rationing materials, making them stretch as far as possible. It's like working in a kitchen where every ingredient is gold, and you'll be beaten if you use too much salt. The pressure is constant. You're trying to do good work while also being as cheap as possible, and those two goals don't always align. Sometimes a body needs extra treatment, extra oils, extra time, but you can't give it that without blowing the budget. So you do the best you can with what you have and hope it's enough. The natron itself is harvested from salt lakes and brought to the workshop in large sacks. It's heavy, coarse, and it gets everywhere. Moving the sacks is a whole task in itself. They weigh as much as a person, and you have to haul them from the storage area to the work tables multiple times a day. Your shoulders burn from the effort. Your hands are torn up from gripping the rough fabric. The sacks leak fine particles that coat everything in a layer of white dust. The floor, the tables, your skin, your lungs. You're breathing it in constantly. It dries out your nasal passages and makes your nose crack and sting. You blow your nose and the cloth comes away grey with salt. You cough and taste bitterness. This is your work environment. This is what you breathe every day. The long-term effects are probably terrible, but there's no occupational health monitoring in ancient Egypt. You'll find out when your lungs give out in 20 years. The linen comes in bolts that have to be cut and prepared. This is one of the less awful tasks, which means it usually gets assigned to you because the senior workers have better things to do. You sit in a corner of the workshop with a bronze blade and a wooden board, cutting strips of even width. It's tedious and mind-numbing. Cut, measure, stack, repeat. Your hand cramps around the knife. Your eyes glaze over. You've cut so much linen that you can do it without thinking, which means your mind wanders to unpleasant places. You think about all the things you could be doing instead of this. You think about how many years you've been doing this. You think about how many more years you'll have to do it. You think about the fact that this is your life, cutting fabric for dead people, and a wave of existential despair washes over you. Then you blink, shake your head, and keep cutting. Feeling sorry for yourself doesn't help. The linen still needs to be cut. The resin is one of the most unpleasant materials to work with. It comes as hard lumps that have to be heated until they melt into a thick, sticky liquid. You do this in a small clay pot over a fire, and the smell that comes off it is intense, sharp and piney and chemical. It fills your head and makes you lightheaded. You stir it with a wooden stick, watching it slowly liquefy, and the heat from the fire is brutal on your face and hands. Sweat drips off your nose into the pot. You wipe your forehead with your arm and leave a smear of soot. The resin bubbles and pops, sending up little spatters that land on your hands and arms. They burn. You flinch and keep stirring. Once it's melted, you have to work quickly because it starts to harden again as it cools. You pour it over the linen wrappings or use it to seal joints, and your hands are coated with it within seconds. It's hot and sticky, and it clings to your skin like tree sap. You'll be picking it off for days. One of the strangest aspects of the job is how normal it becomes. In the beginning, you were horrified and nauseated, and constantly on the verge of quitting. Now, it's just work. You handle dead bodies the way a baker handles dough. It's material. It's a thing you process. You've divorced the person from the body in your mind, because if you don't, you'll go insane. That used to be someone's grandfather, someone's wife, someone's friend. Now, it's a project. It's a task to complete. You refer to bodies by their stage in the process. The one in natron, the fresh one, the wrapping job. Not by names, not as people, just as work units. It's a coping mechanism, and it's necessary, but it's also dehumanizing. You've become callous in a way that would disturb your younger self. You eat lunch next to a corpse and don't think twice about it. You wipe resin off your hands onto your tunic, and then use those same hands to tear bread. The boundaries have dissolved. Everything is mixed together. Life and death, sacred and profane, work and existence. The flies are a constant plague. They're everywhere, fat and sluggish and persistent. They land on the bodies, on your tools, on your food, on your face. You wave them away and they circle and come right back. They crawl on your arms and you barely notice anymore. They buzz in your ears and you tune it out. In the heat of summer, there are hundreds of them, a droning cloud that fills the workshop. You've given up trying to keep them away. You just accept them as part of the environment, like the heat and the smell. Sometimes you accidentally swallow one. It's disgusting, but it happens. You cough, spit, and move on. There are bigger problems than a fly in your throat. The nights are the only time you have any semblance of control over your life, and even those are consumed by exhaustion and chores. You have to maintain your living space, repair your clothes, prepare food for the next day. There's no time to relax, no time to pursue hobbies or interests. You don't have hobbies. You don't have interests. You have work, and you have survival tasks, and that's it. The concept of leisure is completely foreign. Rich people have leisure. They have gardens and music and time to think and dream. You have a dirt floor and a pile of mending and barely enough energy to chew your food. You sit there in the dim light of a single oil lamp, squinting at a torn tunic, trying to thread a needle with fingers that won't stop shaking from fatigue. The thread won't go through the eye. You try again. And again. Your eyes are watering from the strain. You finally get it, pull it through, and start stitching the tear. The stitches are uneven and ugly, but they'll hold. That's all that matters. The oil lamp itself is a source of irritation. It's a small clay dish with oil and a wick, and it produces a weak, flickering light that's barely enough to see by. It also produces smoke, a thin grey stream that rises and spreads across the ceiling, leaving sooty stains. You breathe it in, and it adds to the general assault on your lungs. The flame gutters in the drafts that sneak through the vents and under the door. You have to shield it with your hand to keep it from going out. If it does go out, you have to relight it, which means getting up, finding the fire starter, striking sparks until it catches. It's a whole process. So you sit there, hunched over your mending, protecting the tiny flame, trying to get this done so you can finally sleep. Your neck aches from the angle. Your eyes are burning. The needle slips and pricks your finger. You suck on the puncture and taste iron. You keep sewing. There are moments, rare and brief, when the work has a strange kind of beauty. You finish wrapping a mummy and you step back and look at it. And for a moment you see it not as the product of hours of disgusting labour, but as a work of art. The linen is smooth and white. The painted mask is serene. The whole thing has a kind of elegant simplicity. You've taken something broken and chaotic and made it orderly and eternal. There's a satisfaction in that, a pride that flickers briefly before being drowned out by exhaustion and the immediate need to start the next body. But in that moment, you understand why people respect this work. You understand the importance of what you're doing. Then the overseer shouts at you to stop standing around, and the moment is gone, and you're back to the grind. The repetitive nature of the work does strange things to your mind. You find yourself falling into trances, your hands moving through the familiar motions while your brain drifts. You're wrapping linen and suddenly you realize you don't remember the last 10 minutes. Your body did the work automatically while your mind was somewhere else entirely. It's unsettling but also kind of peaceful. You're so practiced that you can do the job without conscious thought, which frees your mind to wander. Sometimes you replay conversations. Sometimes you imagine elaborate fantasy scenarios where you're not a mummy maker. Sometimes you just exist in a blank, thoughtless state that's almost meditative. The work becomes a kind of mental escape, which is deeply ironic considering how physically horrible it is. The apprentices who join the workshop are always a mix of desperate and naive. They need the work, so they're willing to try, but they have no idea what they're getting into. You watch them on their first day, the way their faces change when they smell the workshop, when they see their first body, when they realize what the job actually entails. Some quit within hours. They mumble an apology and flee, and you never see them again. Others stick it out, white-faced and trembling, determined to make it work. You remember being that person. You remember the shock and horror and the slow, grinding process of becoming numb to it. You want to warn them, to tell them to run while they still can. But you don't. They'll figure it out on their own. And maybe they'll adapt, like you did. Maybe they'll last long enough to become as dead-eyed and resigned as the rest of you. The tools develop personalities over time. You have a favourite knife, one that holds an edge better than the others. You have a hook that's bent at just the right angle for the tricky extractions. You have a particular paddle for mixing that feels good in your hand. These objects become familiar, almost comforting. They're the constants in a job that's full of variables and unpleasantness. You guard them jealously. If someone else uses your knife, you're irrationally annoyed. It's a small thing, but it's yours, and in a life where you own almost nothing and control even less, that matters. The tools are extensions of your body at this point. You know their weight and balance. You know how they'll behave. They're reliable in a way that nothing else is. The pay structure is Byzantine and frustrating. You're paid per body, but the rate varies depending on the type of treatment, the quality of the materials, and the overseer's mood, apparently. A full mummification pays better than a basic one, but it also takes much longer and requires more expensive materials. Sometimes the math doesn't work out in your favour. You spend 3 days on a full treatment and end up making less than you would have on 2 quick basic jobs, but you don't get to choose. The overseer assigns the work and you do what you're told. There are bonuses for high quality work, but they're rare and small. There are penalties for mistakes, and those are common and large. The system is designed to keep you working hard while barely scraping by. It's effective. You're always slightly behind, always hustling, never quite comfortable. The rare occasions when you work on someone important are stressful in a different way. A wealthy merchant or a minor official dies, and their family spares no expense. You're given the best materials, fine linen, expensive oils, imported resins, intricate amulets. The priests are more involved, hovering over your shoulder, chanting prayers, making sure everything is perfect. The pressure is immense. This is a high-profile job. If you mess it up, it's not just your pay on the line, it's your reputation. The whole community will know. You work with extra care, double-checking every step, moving slowly and deliberately. Your hands shake slightly from the tension. The overseer watches closely, ready to criticize. The priests murmur their approval or frown and make you redo something. It takes twice as long as a normal job. By the end, you're wrung out, exhausted not just physically but mentally. But if it goes well, there's a bonus. A small one, but it's something. You take the extra coins and hide them carefully, saving for some distant future need. The mythology surrounding mummification is elaborate and omnipresent. You're supposed to be acting as the god of embalming, performing rituals that echo the original mummification of a mythical figure. The priests explain this constantly. Every step you take has divine significance. Every prayer you mutter is part of a cosmic drama. In theory, this should make the work feel meaningful and important. In practice, it's just another layer of pressure. You have to remember the prayers, you have to perform the actions in the correct order. You have to maintain a respectful demeanor, even when you're elbow deep in a decomposing abdomen. The sacred and the profane are so intertwined that they've become inseparable. You're both a holy figure and a manual laborer, both a conduit of divine power and a guy who reeks of corpses. The contradiction is exhausting. The community's attitude towards death is different from what you'd expect in the modern world. Death is ever present, common, not particularly shocking. People die young from disease, injury, infection. It's normal. The whole culture is built around the idea that this life is just a brief prelude to the next one. That's why mummification is so important. It's not about preserving a memory, it's about ensuring actual, literal survival in the next world. The body is a vessel that the soul will need. Your job is to maintain that vessel. It's a practical matter as much as a spiritual one. This worldview makes your job easier in some ways. People aren't horrified by what you do. They're grateful. They understand the necessity. But it doesn't make the work any less disgusting or exhausting. Understanding why you're doing something doesn't make it pleasant. The gossip in the workshop is a strange mix of mundane and morbid. People complain about their aching backs and their terrible landlords and the price of bread. They also casually discuss the most disturbing aspects of bodies in decay. Someone mentions that the last body had an unusual liver. Someone else talks about the best technique for removing stubborn organs. It's shop talk, but the shop is a mummification workshop, so it's deeply weird. You've become so desensitized that you don't even notice anymore. You're eating lunch and someone is describing a particularly difficult disembowelment and you're just nodding along, chewing your bread, not bothered in the slightest. A visitor would be horrified. You're just having a normal day at work. The most surreal part of the job is how it's made you think about your own death in a very specific way. Most people can abstract death, keep it at a distance, think of it as something that happens to other people. You can't do that. You've seen exactly what happens. You know the stages, the smells, the textures, you know what you'll become. And because of your profession, you've thought a lot about whether you want to be mummified yourself. It's expensive. You probably can't afford it. But the alternative is just being wrapped in cloth and stuck in the ground to rot. And after spending your whole life preserving other people, that feels wrong somehow. It's a strange kind of professional pride. You want the treatment you've spent years giving others, but the economics don't work. You're not saving enough. You probably never will. So you'll end up as exactly the thing you've spent your life preventing. A decomposed corpse, forgotten, dissolved back into the earth. The irony is almost funny. Almost. Your relationship with your own body has become complicated. You're aware of it in a way most people aren't. You feel every ache and pain, and you wonder if this is the beginning of something worse. You know how fragile the human form is. You've seen bodies that were strong and healthy just days before death. You've seen how quickly everything falls apart. It makes you paranoid. Every cough could be the start of a lung infection. Every stomachache could be something serious. You have no way to know. There are no doctors, not really. There are healers who might help, but their methods are as much guesswork as anything. You just have to hope your body holds together long enough for you to keep working. Because if it doesn't, you're finished. No work means no money, means no food, means death. It's that simple. The stakes are always high. The concept of retirement doesn't really exist in your world. You work until you can't, and then you rely on family or community charity, and if you don't have those, you die. There's no pension, no social safety net. You're on your own. This reality colours everything you do. You can't afford to get injured. You can't afford to get sick. You can't afford to slow down. So you push through pain and exhaustion and injury, because the alternative is unthinkable. You've seen what happens to people who can't work anymore. They end up begging, homeless, starving. It's a grim fate, and you're terrified of it. So you keep going, day after day, even when your body is screaming at you to stop. There's no choice. You work or you die. Those are the options. The younger workers sometimes ask you how you've lasted so long. It's not a compliment, it's genuine confusion. How do you keep doing this, year after year, when it's so awful? You don't have a good answer. Habit, maybe. Necessity, definitely. A kind of numb resignation that's developed over time. You've stopped expecting things to get better. This is your life. This is all it will ever be. That acceptance is depressing but also freeing in a strange way. You're not hoping for a rescue or a lucky break. You're not waiting for things to improve. You're just existing, doing the work, getting through each day. It's a low bar, but it's achievable. You can manage that, so you keep going. The workshop has a smell that you carry with you everywhere. It's in your clothes, your hair, your skin. You've tried everything to get rid of it. Different soaps, oils, perfumes. Nothing works. The smell is part of you now. It's soaked into your pores. People recognize you by it. You walk past and they know immediately what you do. It's a mark, a brand that you can't remove. In some ways it's isolating, but in other ways it's freeing. You've stopped trying to fit in or be accepted by the wider community. You're a mummy maker. That's who you are. People can take it or leave it. Most leave it, and that's fine. You have your work and your fellow workers, and that's enough. It has to be enough because it's all you have. The dreams you have at night are often about work. You're wrapping a body, and the linen won't stay in place. You're trying to remove an organ, and it keeps slipping out of your grasp. You're being inspected by a priest, and you realize you've forgotten all the prayers. These dreams are stressful and vivid, and they follow you into waking. You wake up with your heart pounding, relieved that it was just a dream, and then you remember that you have to go do the real version of those tasks in a few hours. The line between sleep and work is blurred. Work dominates your waking life and invades your sleeping life. There's no escape from it. It's all-consuming. The other workers are the closest thing you have to friends, but even those relationships are shaped by the job. You're bonded by shared misery more than genuine affection. You help each other because you have to, not because you particularly like each other. You're all just trying to survive. There's a camaraderie in that, a mutual understanding, but it's not deep. You don't know much about their personal lives. You don't ask. They don't ask about yours. You exist together in the workshop, and then you go your separate ways. It's a shallow kind of connection, but it's better than nothing. At least you're not completely alone. The rich clients sometimes tour the workshop, wanting to see where their family member will be processed. This is always awkward. They're dressed in fine linen, jewellery, perfumed oils. They step carefully, trying not to touch anything, holding cloths over their noses. They look around with a mix of curiosity and disgust. You show them the tables, the tools, the materials. You explain the process in vague, sanitized terms. You don't mention the smell or the fluids or the flies. You talk about preservation and eternity and sacred rituals. They nod and look uncomfortable and leave as quickly as possible. Then they go home to their comfortable houses and try to forget what they saw. You go back to work. The contrast between their lives and yours is stark and painful. You're doing this awful job so they can have peace of mind about their dead relatives, and they look at you like you're something distasteful they stepped in. The materials sometimes run out or are delayed, and when that happens, work stops. Bodies pile up, waiting for supplies. They're stored in a cool, shaded area, but they're still decaying. The smell gets worse. The pressure mounts. Everyone is stressed and irritable. The overseer is yelling at suppliers. You're standing around with nothing to do, which means no pay, but you can't leave because the supplies might arrive at any moment, and then you'll need to work double time to catch up. So you wait, sitting in the shade, swatting flies, watching the pile of bodies grow. It's deeply unpleasant. The waiting is almost worse than the work. At least when you're working, you're occupied. When you're waiting, you're just sitting there, staring at corpses, thinking about how much your life sucks. The technique itself evolves slowly over time. Someone discovers that a different type of oil works better. Someone figures out a more efficient way to pack the natron. These small improvements are passed around, discussed, adopted, or rejected. You're part of a tradition that stretches back generations, and you're contributing to it in tiny ways. It's the only creative aspect of the job. Everything else is rote repetition, but occasionally you get to problem solve, to experiment, to improve. Those moments are satisfying in a way that's hard to explain. You're not just a mindless labourer. You're a craftsman, refining your technique, passing on knowledge. It's a small pride, but it's something. The water supply is a constant issue that nobody outside the workshop thinks about. You need huge amounts of water for washing bodies, cleaning tools, mixing solutions, and keeping yourself from dying of thirst in the heat. The well is a 10-minute walk away, and someone has to haul heavy clay jars back and forth multiple times a day. This job usually falls to whoever the overseer is annoyed with, which means you're doing it more often than you'd like. The jars are awkward and heavy, and you have to balance them carefully or they'll tip and spill. The walk there is fine. The walk back is agony. Your arms are burning. Your shoulders are screaming. The jar keeps slipping in your sweaty grip. You have to stop every few minutes to rest, setting it down carefully so it doesn't crack on the stones. By the time you get back to the workshop, you're drenched in sweat and your arms are shaking. And then someone tells you they need more water. You want to scream, but you just turn around and walk back to the well. The well itself is a gathering place for the neighborhood, and you're always aware of how people react to you. The women doing their washing move slightly away when you approach. They don't say anything, but the message is clear. You smell. You're associated with death. You're unwelcome. You lower your jar into the well, haul it back up hand over hand, the rope rough against your already damaged palms. Water sloshes over the sides and onto your feet. You fill your jar, hoist it up, and leave without making eye contact with anyone. The social rejection stings every time, even though you're used to it. You're providing an essential service, but that doesn't make people want to be near you. You're tolerated, not accepted. There's a difference, and you feel it every day. The actual physical process of lifting and moving bodies is something nobody prepares you for. A human body is heavy and awkward in ways that other heavy objects aren't. The weight is distributed strangely. Nothing is solid. Everything shifts and bends in uncomfortable ways. When rigor mortis sets in, the body becomes stiff and rigid, which makes it easier in some ways but harder in others. You can't adjust the position. You can't bend the limbs. You're essentially moving a person-shaped plank that weighs as much as a full-grown adult. You and a colleague grab the shoulders and feet, count to 3, and lift. Your back takes the strain immediately. You waddle over to the preparation table, trying not to drop it, trying not to think about the fact that you're holding a dead person. You lower it down carefully. Your back spasms. You straighten up slowly, one hand pressed to your lower spine, breathing hard. The psychological toll of the work is something nobody talks about, but everyone feels. You're surrounded by death constantly. You're touching dead people, looking at dead people, smelling dead people, all day, every day. It does something to your mind. You start to feel numb to everything. Joy, sadness, fear, excitement, they all feel muted and distant. You're operating in a kind of grey fog where nothing really affects you anymore. You see a dead body and feel nothing. You hear that someone you knew has died and feel nothing. You're emotionally flatlined. The only things you feel strongly are physical. Pain, hunger, exhaustion. Everything else has been dulled by overexposure to mortality. You're not depressed exactly. You're just empty, going through the motions, existing without really living. The younger apprentices sometimes ask philosophical questions that you've long stopped thinking about. What happens to the soul during the mummification? Do the dead know what we're doing to them? Are we helping them or just preserving meat? You don't have answers. You stopped asking those questions years ago because they made the work impossible. You can't think too deeply about what you're doing or you'll fall apart. So you give them non-answers. You repeat what the priests say. You tell them to focus on the technique and not worry about the meaning. They look dissatisfied, and you remember being that person, wanting reassurance, wanting purpose. You don't tell them that the purpose fades and all that's left is the routine. They'll figure that out themselves soon enough, or they'll quit. Either way, it's not your problem. The seasonal winds bring different smells into the workshop, which somehow makes everything worse. When the wind comes from the river, It carries the scent of fish and wet mud and decaying plants, and it mixes with the workshop smells into something truly special. When it comes from the desert, it brings hot, dry air full of sand that coats everything and makes the existing smells more concentrated. When it comes from the city, it brings cooking fires and animal pens and humanity, and none of it helps. There's no direction the wind can blow that improves things. You just have to endure whatever olfactory nightmare the day brings. Sometimes you try breathing through a cloth, but it gets soaked with sweat and sticks to your face and makes breathing harder without actually filtering much. You give up and just breathe the terrible air directly. The competitive aspect of the work is subtle but present. The senior workers are protective of their status and knowledge. They don't teach you the best techniques unless they absolutely have to. They want to remain indispensable. You're doing the same to the workers below you, hoarding little tricks and shortcuts, because your position is precarious and you need every advantage. It creates a toxic environment where everyone is slightly undermining everyone else. Someone asks you how you got the linen so smooth, and you give them a vague answer that's technically true, but leaves out the crucial detail. They do the same to you. Everyone is struggling individually instead of helping each other, because helping others might mean losing your own position. It's exhausting and sad and completely understandable given the circumstances. The tools occasionally break at the worst possible times. You're in the middle of a delicate organ removal and your hook snaps. You're left standing there holding half a bronze tool, staring at the body, trying to figure out how to proceed. You can't just stop. The job has to be finished. So you improvise. You use a different tool that's not quite right for the task. You work more carefully, more slowly. Everything takes twice as long. Your back is aching from the extended time bent over the table. Your fingers are cramping from the awkward grip. You finally finish and you're an hour behind schedule, which means the overseer is going to have words with you, which means your day just got significantly worse, and you still have to fix or replace the broken tool, which will take time you don't have, and possibly money you definitely don't have. The relationship between the workers and the priests is complicated and often tense. The priests are responsible for the religious aspects, the prayers and rituals and spiritual supervision. You're responsible for the actual physical work. In theory, your partner's working towards the same goal. In practice, the priests treat you like servants. They give orders without understanding the practical difficulties. They insist on specific procedures that make the work harder without making it better. They criticize your technique without knowing how to do it themselves. You can't argue with them because they have religious authority and you're just a worker. So you nod and say yes, and then do what you were going to do anyway, just more carefully, so they don't notice. It's a constant game of appearing obedient while actually maintaining the workflow that keeps the whole operation running. The linen wrappings have to be done in a specific pattern that's been handed down for generations, and if you deviate from it, the priest will know and you'll be in trouble. The pattern is complex and has to be memorized. Certain strips go horizontally, certain strips go vertically, certain strips go diagonally. There are specific numbers of layers required in specific areas. The head gets wrapped differently from the torso. The arms and legs each have their own technique. You learn this over years of practice, watching senior workers, making mistakes and being corrected. Now your hands know the pattern without your brain having to think about it. You wrap automatically, the linen moving through your fingers in the prescribed way. But if you get distracted or interrupted, you lose your place. You have to stop and figure out where you are in the sequence. You unwrap a section to check. You've wasted time and materials. The overseer notices. Your pay gets docked. You swear under your breath and start again, more carefully this time. The different types of bodies present different challenges. A body from someone who died young and healthy is relatively straightforward. The tissues are firm, the organs are easy to identify and remove, the preservation goes smoothly. A body from someone who died old or sick is much harder. The tissues are fragile and fall apart. The organs are diseased and difficult to handle. Everything takes longer and is more unpleasant, but you're paid the same regardless, which seems unfair. You're working twice as hard for the same money. You mention this once to the overseer. He laughs and tells you that life isn't fair. You already knew that, but having it confirmed so bluntly is demoralizing. You go back to work and stop complaining. Complaining changes nothing. The stone tables themselves are ancient, worn smooth by decades of use, and probably used for hundreds of bodies. They're stained and marked in ways that won't come out no matter how much you scrub. The history of your profession is literally etched into the stone. You're part of a long line of people who've done this terrible job, and you'll leave your own marks for whoever comes after you. There's something both comforting and depressing about that continuity. You're not alone across time. Other people have suffered through this just like you are. But also, this job will continue after you're gone. You're replaceable. You're just one more worker in an endless chain of workers. Your individual suffering doesn't matter in the grand scheme. The work will go on. The process of drying out a body takes 40 days, and during that time you have to check it regularly to make sure it's progressing properly. You brush off excess salt, turn it occasionally, inspect for problem areas. Each check takes time and pulls you away from other tasks. You're juggling multiple bodies at different stages, trying to keep track of what needs to be done when. It's a complicated mental puzzle. This one needs oiling today. That one needs to be turned. This other one is ready for wrapping. You keep track of it all in your head because there's no written system. You just have to remember. Sometimes you forget. You realize you haven't checked a body in 3 days, and you panic, rushing over to inspect it, hoping it's not ruined. Usually it's fine. Salt is forgiving. But the stress of possibly making a catastrophic mistake is constant. The animal mummies are a different subset of the work, and they're somehow more depressing than the human ones. Rich people want their pets preserved to accompany them to the afterlife. Cats, dogs, birds, even monkeys sometimes. The animals are small and delicate, and the process is fiddly. You're trying to remove tiny organs with tools designed for human-sized work. Your fingers are too big and clumsy. Everything is harder, and there's something particularly sad about a dead cat wrapped in linen, its little body stiff and still. Animals don't understand death. They don't get an afterlife explanation. They're just gone. You wrap them carefully anyway, because someone loved them enough to pay for this. But it weighs on you in a different way than the human bodies do. The bronze hooks used for brain removal are particularly unpleasant tools. The process involves inserting the hook up through the nasal cavity, breaking through into the skull, and pulling out brain tissue in pieces. It's a delicate operation that requires a steady hand and a strong stomach. The hook has to be angled correctly or you'll damage the face, which is unacceptable. The tissue comes out in small, grey, wormy chunks. You pull it out bit by bit, dropping it into a waste jar. The smell is indescribable. It's sharp and metallic and biological in a way that's worse than regular decomposition. Your hand is inside someone's skull. You're destroying their brain to pull it out through their nose. The absurdity and horror of it would be overwhelming if you let yourself think about it. So you don't think, you just do. The waste products from mummification have to be disposed of properly, which means someone has to deal with jars full of discarded tissue and fluids. That someone is usually you. The jars are heavy and disgusting, and they have to be carried outside and buried in a designated area. You're walking through the streets of the neighborhood, carrying a jar of human organs, trying not to drop it, trying not to think about what would happen if it broke and spilled. The burial pit is outside the city, a decent walk, and the jars get heavier with every step. You reach the pit, which is a large hole in the ground that smells exactly as bad as you'd imagine. You pour in the contents, trying not to look, trying not to breathe. The jar empties with a wet, slopping sound. You're definitely not thinking about what just happened. You rinse the jar with sand and walk back to the workshop to do it all again with the next one. The overseer has favourites, and you're not one of them. The favourites get the easier jobs, the better materials, the more lenient treatment. You're competent but not liked, which means you get the standard assignments and the standard pay and the standard criticism. There's no path to becoming a favourite that you can see. It's based on personality and politics, and probably whose family is connected to whose. You're not good at that game, you're just good at the work. But being good at the work doesn't actually get you anywhere. The favourites advance, and you stay in the middle year after year. You've stopped hoping for advancement. You just do your job and take your pay and try not to make things worse. The layers of linen build up slowly, and by the time you're done, the body is significantly larger and heavier than when you started. It's like wrapping a very disturbing present. Each layer has to be smoothed and secured before the next one goes on. Your hands are constantly moving, pressing down, tucking in, winding around. The repetitive motion makes your forearms burn and your fingers cramp. You've developed calluses in specific places from handling the linen. Your fingertips are tough and insensitive. You could probably hold hot coals and not feel much. That's not a useful skill outside the workshop, but it's what you've got. Your body has adapted to this work in ways that make you less suited for anything else. The moment when you place the heart scarab is supposed to be spiritually significant. It's an amulet that protects the heart during judgment in the afterlife. The priests make a big deal about it. You're supposed to say a prayer and place it precisely over where the heart is. In reality, you're tired and rushed, and you're just trying to remember which body gets which scarab, because the rich clients have custom ones, and the basic clients get generic ones, and you absolutely cannot mix them up. You mutter the prayer from memory, place the scarab, wrap over it, move on. You've done this hundreds of times. The spiritual significance has been buried under the repetition. It's just another step in the process now. The preservation oils are stored in large ceramic jars that are kept in the coolest part of the workshop, which isn't actually cool, just slightly less hot. The oils have a tendency to go rancid in the heat, which is a disaster because they are expensive, and the smell of rancid oil added to everything else is truly spectacular. You check them regularly, sniffing each jar, trying to determine if they're still good. Your nose has become a quality control tool. You can detect the early stages of spoilage by scent alone. When you find a bad batch, it has to be discarded, and the overseer treats it like you personally ruined it, even though you have no control over the storage conditions. He yells, you apologize, everyone moves on. The financial loss comes out of the workshop budget, which eventually affects everyone's pay. So now your co-workers are annoyed with you too, even though it wasn't your fault. It's exhausting being blamed for things beyond your control. The preparation of the natron involves grinding large crystals into smaller, more manageable chunks. This is done with a mortar and pestle, and it's tedious, repetitive work that makes your shoulders ache. The crystals are hard and resist being crushed. You pound away, making slow progress, breathing in the salty dust that puffs up with each strike. The sound echoes in the workshop, a rhythmic thudding that goes on for hours. Your ears ring from it. Your hand goes numb from gripping the pestle. You switch hands, but your other hand is weaker and less coordinated. The rhythm breaks. You get frustrated. You keep pounding. Eventually, you have enough ground natron for the day's needs. Your shoulders are screaming. You move on to the next task without rest, because rest is a luxury you can't afford. The moments when a family comes to collect their finished mummy are strange and emotionally complicated. They're grateful and emotional and treating the wrapped body with reverence. You helped create this object of their devotion, but you know exactly what's underneath those neat linen wrappings. You know what that body looked like when it arrived. You know what you did to it. You know all the disgusting details that they're happily ignorant of. You maintain a respectful expression and accept their thanks. The disconnect between their perception and your knowledge is profound. They see a sacred object. You see your work. Both perspectives are true, but they're incompatible. You don't shatter their illusion. You just nod and help them load the mummy onto a sledge for transport. They leave happy. You go back to the next body. The rhythm of the work week is oppressive in its sameness. Every day is essentially identical. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. There are no variations, no surprises, nothing to break up the monotony. The bodies change, but the tasks don't. You fall into a kind of trance state where time becomes meaningless. You can't remember if something happened yesterday or 3 days ago. The days blur together into one endless shift. You lose track of what month it is, what season. Time passes and you barely notice. You're just working, always working, caught in a loop that has no end. It's psychologically numbing. You're not living so much as existing on autopilot. The junior workers sometimes try to make friends with you, looking for guidance or mentorship. You're not unkind, but you're not particularly helpful either. You've learned that getting attached to people in this job is pointless. They'll quit or die or move on, and you'll still be here, doing the same work. Better to keep everyone at arm's length. You answer their questions curtly. You show them the basics and leave them to figure out the rest. They look disappointed, hurt even. You remember feeling that way when you were new, and the senior workers treated you the same way. Now you understand. It's not cruelty, it's self-preservation. Emotional distance is the only way to survive this job long term. They'll understand eventually, or they won't last. The priest who supervises your work has a particularly annoying habit of showing up right when you're in the middle of something delicate. You're carefully positioning an amulet, your hands steady and precise, and he appears at your elbow asking questions. Did you say the proper prayer? Is that amulet consecrated? Are you sure you're placing it correctly? His breath smells like garlic and wine, and he's standing too close. You want to shove him away, but you can't, because he has authority over you. So you answer his questions through gritted teeth, trying to maintain your concentration, trying not to drop the tiny amulet or lose your place in the wrapping sequence. He finally leaves, satisfied with your answers. Your hands are shaking slightly from suppressed irritation. You take a breath and continue working. The drinking water that's available during the day is warm and tastes like clay from sitting in jars all morning. But it's water, and you need it desperately, so you drink it. You tip the jar and gulp it down, feeling it slide warm and slightly gritty down your throat. It doesn't really refresh you, it just keeps you from collapsing. You set the jar down and immediately feel thirsty again because you're sweating out fluids faster than you can replace them. The constant state of mild dehydration makes your head pound and your thoughts fuzzy. You drink more water. It helps marginally. You return to work, slightly dizzy, trying to focus. The storage area where finished mummies wait for collection is eerie and unsettling. even after years of working here. It's a dim space, filled with wrapped figures standing upright or lying on shelves. They're arranged in rows, silent and still, and when you walk through to retrieve one for a client, you're surrounded by them. The light is weak and flickering from oil lamps. Shadows dance on the walls. You know intellectually that these are just objects, just preserved bodies, but the atmosphere is oppressive. You walk quickly, find the one you need, grab it, and leave. You don't linger. Nobody lingers in the storage area. It's too strange, too heavy with the presence of death multiplied. The times when you accidentally cut yourself with a blade or hook are terrifying, not just because of the pain, but because of where your hands have been. You're working with decomposing organic matter all day. An open wound is an invitation to infection, and infection can kill you. There are no antibiotics, no proper medical care. You just have to wash it out as best you can and hope for the best. You rinse the cut with water, pack it with honey, which is supposed to help, and wrap it with clean linen. Then you wait and worry. You check it obsessively for signs of infection, redness, swelling, heat, discharge. Sometimes you get lucky and it heals cleanly. Sometimes it gets infected and you spend a week in pain, feverish, wondering if this is it, if you're going to die from a stupid cut because you slipped with a knife. Most of the time you survive, but the fear never goes away. The sound of the workshop is a constant background noise that you've learned to tune out but never stops. The scrape of tools on stone, the rustle of linen, the splash of water, the crackle of fires, the buzz of flies, the murmur of prayers from priests, the occasional curse from a worker who's dropped something or hurt themselves, the thud of footsteps on packed earth. All of it blends into a kind of ambient soundtrack to your misery. When you lie in bed at night in the relative quiet of your house, you can still hear it in your head. The workshop noise is burned into your memory. Even in silence you hear it. The days when multiple bodies arrive at once are absolute chaos. The workshop is only equipped to handle so many at a time, and when you're suddenly dealing with 4 or 5 new arrivals, everything becomes a desperate scramble. Bodies have to be assessed, prioritized, stored temporarily. The cool storage area fills up. Some bodies have to be processed faster than ideal. You're rushing through steps that should be done carefully, trying to maintain quality while dealing with impossible volume. The overseer is shouting at everyone to move faster. The priests are concerned about proper procedures being followed. You're just trying to keep up. Your movements become frantic and sloppy. You knock over a jar of oil. Someone else trips over a tool left on the floor. The whole operation is barely controlled chaos. By the end of the day, you're completely destroyed, and you know tomorrow will be more of the same because the backlog doesn't clear quickly. The economic reality of your situation is that you'll never get ahead. You make just enough to survive, and any unexpected expense is a crisis. Your sandal breaks and needs replacing. That's half a week's food budget gone. You get sick and can't work for 3 days. Now you're behind on your rent. The landlord is threatening to evict you. You pick up extra work where you can, but there's not much available for someone with your specific skills and your general exhaustion. You're trapped in a cycle of near poverty that you can't escape. Every day you work hard, and every day you end up in the same place. There's no upward mobility. There's no savings building up. There's just the constant grind of barely making it. The specific smell of your workshop is unique in the neighborhood. People can tell they're getting close just by the scent on the air. It's a combination of natron salt, resin smoke, decomposition, incense and human sweat, all baked together by the relentless sun. It's not a smell that exists anywhere else. When you're approaching after an errand, you catch it from 2 streets away, and your stomach clenches. That smell means work. It means the next 8 hours of misery. You slow down slightly, reluctant to arrive, but you can't delay forever. You walk through the entrance and the smell intensifies, wrapping around you like a physical thing. Your home. This horrible place is where you spend most of your life. The thought is crushingly depressing. The conversations you have with your co-workers are either completely mundane or darkly morbid, with no in-between. You talk about the weather, the price of bread, someone's sore knee, or you talk about the body that came in yesterday that was in such bad shape it was barely recognizable as human. Or the time someone made a catastrophic mistake and ruined an expensive mummification. There's no middle ground. You can't talk about hopes and dreams because nobody has those anymore. You can't talk about family because most of you are estranged from your families to some degree. You can't talk about the future because the future looks exactly like the present. So you make small talk, or you make dark jokes, and that's the full range of your workplace communication. The salt gets everywhere and ruins everything. It's in your hair, making it dry and brittle. It's on your skin, causing rashes and irritation. It's in your lungs, making you cough. It's in your food because your hands are covered in it, and you can't get it all off before eating. Everything you own has a faint coating of white dust. Your sleeping mat is crunchy with it. Your storage jars have it crusted around the openings. Your water tastes slightly salty because particles have fallen in. You've accepted that you'll never be fully free of salt. It's part of your environment now, as permanent and inescapable as the sun and the heat. The wooden sledges that bodies are transported on are heavy and awkward, and helping to load or unload one is always a production. The mummy has to be lifted carefully and positioned just right. The sledge has to be balanced so it doesn't tip during transport. You and 2 other workers are grunting and straining, shuffling around trying to coordinate. Someone's grip slips and the body shifts. Everyone panics for a moment until it's secured again. You finally get it loaded and step back, breathing hard, sweating profusely. The family is watching this whole operation, probably thinking that their loved one deserves more dignified handling. But this is reality. Death isn't dignified. Moving preserved corpses isn't graceful. It's awkward and difficult and sometimes undignified. You do your best, but your best is limited by physics and human frailty. The religious festivals that happen throughout the year are times when the temple is busy and the priests are distracted, which means less oversight of your work. You'd think this would be a relief, but it actually makes things harder because the priests are the ones who coordinate the workflow and handle client relations. When they're busy with festivals, you have to deal directly with families, which is outside your skill set and comfort zone. You're good at mummification. You're terrible at customer service. You don't know what to say to a grieving widow. You don't know how to explain costs to an angry son. You mumble awkward responses and try to get back to the actual work as quickly as possible. The priests return from the festival and criticize how you handled things. You can't win. The moments when you realize you've forgotten something important are pure panic. You're halfway through wrapping a body and you suddenly can't remember if you inserted the required amulet. You have to stop and try to recall the sequence of events. Did you do it? You think you did it. You're almost sure. But the consequences of forgetting are severe, so you carefully unwrap the section you just finished to check. The amulet is there. Relief floods through you. You rewrap the section, time and materials wasted, but at least you didn't make a catastrophic error. Your memory is failing from exhaustion and stress. You used to be sharp. Now you're constantly second-guessing yourself, constantly checking and rechecking, terrified of making mistakes. The physical environment of ancient Egypt is harsh in ways that modern people can't really comprehend. The heat is brutal and constant. The sun beats down without mercy. There's no shade except what you create. There's no cooling technology. There's no relief. You're just enduring it day after day, letting it bake you until you're as dried out as the mummies you're making. The buildings hold heat like ovens. The ground is too hot to walk on barefoot in midday. The air shimmers and distorts. You're dizzy from it. Your vision goes spotty. You pour water on your head, and it evaporates within minutes. The heat is not just uncomfortable, it's dangerous, and you're expected to do hard physical labor in it regardless. People die from heat in the summer. You might be one of them someday. The hierarchical nature of society means you'll never speak to anyone truly important. You exist in a layer of society that's below the notice of officials, scribes, wealthy merchants, and priests of high rank. You might see them pass by in the street, dressed in fine clothes, carried in chairs, surrounded by servants. You're invisible to them. They don't see you. If they did see you, they'd see a dirty worker who smells bad and isn't worth acknowledgement. The gap between your existence and theirs is vast and unbridgeable. You're both human, technically, but you might as well be different species for all the interaction you'll ever have. This is just how the world works. Some people matter, you don't. The technique for removing organs requires you to essentially turn the body into a hollowed-out shell while keeping the exterior intact. It's a delicate process that demands precision despite the disgusting nature of the work. You're reaching in through the small incision, feeling around, identifying structures by touch, pulling them out carefully. If you're too rough, you'll damage the abdominal wall and create a weak spot that might break during wrapping. If you're too timid, you won't get everything out and the body won't preserve properly. You have to find the balance between thorough and gentle, which is absurdly difficult when you're working blind inside a dead person. Your hand cramps from being held in awkward positions. Your shoulder aches from reaching. You finally extract what you think is the last major organ and withdraw your hand. It's covered in substances you're trying not to think about. You rinse it in a bowl of water that immediately turns cloudy. You've done this countless times, but it never becomes easy. It just becomes bearable. The dust storms that occasionally blow through the region are nightmares for the workshop. Fine sand gets into everything, contaminating the salt, coating the bodies, settling on the linen, mixing with the oils. You have to stop work and cover everything as best you can, but the sand infiltrates anyway. It's in your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your lungs. You're coughing and choking, trying to breathe through cloth, trying to protect the materials. The storm passes after what feels like hours, leaving everything coated in a layer of grit. You spend the next day cleaning, sweeping, shaking out fabric, straining contaminated oils. The sand has worked its way into sealed jars somehow. You're finding it for weeks afterwards, little pockets of grit in unexpected places. The whole experience sets back your work schedule and costs money in ruined materials. And there's nothing you can do about it. Dust storms happen, you just deal with the consequences. The knowledge that your life expectancy is probably not great weighs on you more as you get older. You've seen workers in their 40s and 50s, and they're wrecks. Bent backs, persistent coughs, trembling hands, constant pain. That's your future if you make it that long. You'll work until your body fails completely and then you'll die. Probably quickly because there's no social safety net to catch you. The prospect of lingering for years as an invalid is unlikely because you can't afford to not work. So you'll work and work and work until one day you collapse and don't get up. It's grim, but it's realistic. You're not being pessimistic. You're being practical. This is what happens to people in your profession. You've seen it over and over. The amulets that get placed within the wrappings are small carved objects, usually made of stone or faience, and they're surprisingly expensive. The workshop is charged for them by the temple, and that cost gets passed on to the clients. You handle them carefully because dropping and breaking one would be a financial disaster. They're smooth and cool in your palm, carved with symbols and images that supposedly have magical protective properties. You don't know if you believe in their power. You've placed hundreds of them, and you've never felt anything mystical or significant. They're just small objects that have to go in specific locations. But they matter to the clients and to the priests, so they matter to you by extension. You treat them with respect, not because you're reverent, but because you're professional. The times when nobles or officials die, there's pressure to do exceptional work, because these people have connections and influence even in death. Their families will inspect the work closely. Other important people will see the result. It's advertising for the workshop. Do well and you might get more high-end clients. Do poorly and your reputation suffers. So you put in extra effort, use the best techniques, take your time. The overseer hovers nearby, watching, offering commentary. The priests are more involved than usual. The whole atmosphere is tense. You're working with expensive materials on a body that belonged to someone important, and every move feels weighted with significance. Your hands shake slightly from the pressure. You force them steady and continue. The wrapping has to be perfect. The mask has to be beautiful. Everything has to be flawless. By the time it's finished, you're completely exhausted, but also slightly proud. You did good work. It won't change your station in life, but at least you did good work. The concept of leisure time is so foreign to your existence that you wouldn't even know what to do with it if you had it. You don't have hobbies. You don't have interests beyond survival. You don't pursue pleasure or entertainment. When you have a rare moment of free time, you mostly just sit and stare at nothing, too tired to move. Your life has been reduced to work and recovery from work. There's nothing else. You vaguely remember being young and having energy for things that weren't essential. You remember running for fun, playing games, laughing easily. That person is gone. You're what's left. A tired, damaged worker whose entire existence revolves around the job. It's a hollow life, but it's the only one you have. The hierarchy within the workshop extends to who gets to use which tools and materials. The senior workers have first pick of everything. They get the sharpest knives, the best linen, the freshest oils. You get what's left over, which is often second rate. Your knife is slightly dull, so you have to work harder. Your linen is coarser, so it's harder to wrap smoothly. Your oils are older, so they don't smell as nice. These small disadvantages add up. Your work takes longer and looks slightly worse through no fault of your own, just because you don't have access to the best materials. And when the overseer inspects your work and finds it wanting compared to the senior worker's results, he doesn't account for the quality of materials. He just sees inferior work and judges you accordingly. The system is designed to keep you in your place. The sounds of the city beyond the workshop are a constant backdrop that reminds you there's a world out there you're not really part of. You hear children playing in the streets. You hear merchants calling out their wares. You hear music from a festival or celebration. You hear normal life happening while you're dealing with death. The contrast is stark and painful. Other people are living while you're just surviving. They're experiencing joy and community and normality while you're elbow deep in preservation work. You're separate from society, even though you're geographically in the middle of it. The sounds of life happening nearby just emphasize how removed you are from actually living. The finishing touches on a mummy include applying various protective spells written on the linen wrappings. A scribe comes in to do this part because you're not literate. He writes in careful hieratic script prayers and spells that will protect the deceased in the afterlife. You watch him work, envious of his clean hands and his respected profession. Scribes are important. Scribes are valued. Scribes don't smell like death. You're providing the physical labour while he provides the intellectual content, and his contribution is considered more valuable even though your work is more difficult and more unpleasant. The unfairness of it rankles, but what can you do? You can't read or write. You were never taught. Your path was set early, and there's no changing it now. The expectations placed on you are simultaneously too high and too low. You're expected to do perfect work with imperfect materials, under impossible conditions for minimal pay. But you're also treated as expendable, replaceable, not worth investing in, or improving conditions for. The contradiction is maddening. If the work is so important, why are the workers treated so poorly? If the workers are so expendable, why demand perfection? The answer, of course, is that it benefits the people in charge to have high standards and low costs. Your suffering is just an accepted cost of doing business. The system works perfectly well for everyone except you and your colleagues who are actually doing the work. The body modifications that happen during preservation change the shape and weight of the person significantly. You start with a bloated, heavy corpse. You end with a dried, lighter mummy that's been hollowed out internally and padded with linen and sawdust. The transformation is dramatic. The person's family might not recognize the dimensions of what you return to them if it weren't for the face mask painted with the deceased's features. You're essentially creating an idealized version of the body, one that's preserved and presentable but fundamentally altered from what the living person looked like. It's strange to think about. You're not preserving the person so much as creating a ritual object that represents them. The distinction matters philosophically, but not practically. Either way, you're wrapping linen around dried flesh for hours. The younger workers sometimes express horror or moral concern about what you're doing, and you remember feeling that way once. They ask questions like, "Isn't it wrong to cut into a body?" Or, "Doesn't it bother you that this was a person?" You don't have good answers because you've suppressed those concerns so deeply that they don't surface anymore. You tell them it's necessary work, that the priests approve it, that the families request it, that you're helping people achieve eternal life. You give them the official justifications. But the truth is you've stopped thinking of it in moral terms at all. It's just work. You've had to disconnect the task from its implications in order to keep doing it. And that disconnection is probably unhealthy but absolutely necessary. They'll develop their own disconnection if they last, or they'll quit. Those are the only options. The layout of the workshop is designed for efficiency rather than comfort, which means the workflow is optimized but the workers are miserable. The preparation tables are positioned to make moving bodies between stations easy. The storage of materials is arranged for quick access. The waste disposal area is downwind. It all makes logical sense from a process perspective, but there's no consideration for worker comfort, no seating for breaks, no shelter from sun during the hottest hours, no pleasant spaces to recover between tasks. You're components in a production system, not human beings with needs. The workshop functions smoothly as a corpse processing facility. It's terrible as a place for humans to spend their lives. The specific combination of chemicals and materials you work with has probably done permanent damage to your lungs and skin. The natron salt is caustic. The resin fumes are toxic. The oils are irritating. The incense smoke is harsh. You're breathing and touching all of this constantly, day after day, year after year. The long-term health effects are probably catastrophic, but you won't live long enough to find out the full extent, because something else will kill you first. You cough constantly, your skin is dry and cracked and prone to infections, your eyes water and sting. These are just accepted conditions of the work. There's no protective equipment, there's no safety training, there's just you and the materials and the understanding that this is slowly destroying you. The concept of customer satisfaction exists even in ancient Egypt, and you're subject to it despite having no control over many variables. A family is unhappy with the results and complains to the temple. The priests investigate and decide whether the complaint is valid. Sometimes they side with the family and you get penalized, even though you did everything correctly. The body was just in poor condition to start with, or the family's expectations were unrealistic, but you're the one who suffers the consequences. You lose pay, you get extra scrutiny, your reputation takes a hit. The customer is always right, apparently, even when they're wrong. It's frustrating and unfair, and there's no appeal process. The priests make a decision, and that's final. The rare occasions when you get a full day of rest due to some major religious event are disorienting. You wake up and for a moment can't figure out why no one is banging on your door. Then you remember, no work today. The feeling is strange, relief mixed with anxiety, because no work means no pay, and you're already behind on everything. But your body desperately needs the break. You spend the day doing essentially nothing. You sleep late. You eat a slow breakfast. You sit in the shade and watch the world go by. Your mind doesn't know what to do with leisure time. You're restless and bored, but also too tired to do anything productive. By evening, you're actually looking forward to work tomorrow just because it'll give you structure and purpose. That's how deeply the work has infected your psychology. You can't even enjoy a day off without feeling uncomfortable. The tools made of bronze are expensive and carefully tracked. If you lose or break one, you're paying for it, which might mean a week's wages gone. So you're obsessive about keeping track of your tools. You count them at the start of the day and at the end. You clean them carefully. You store them in the same place every time. The idea of losing a hook or knife fills you with dread, not because you're attached to the tool, but because of the financial consequences. When a tool does eventually wear out or break from normal use, you have to present it to the overseer and explain what happened. He examines it suspiciously, trying to determine if you were careless. He usually decides you were and docks your pay anyway. The system assumes you're always at fault. The sensory memory of this work will haunt you for the rest of your life. Even if you somehow escaped tomorrow and never did this work again, you'd still smell the workshop in your nightmares. You'd still feel the texture of dried flesh under your fingers. You'd still taste the salt-resin decay combination in the back of your throat. These experiences are burned into your brain permanently. You're scarred mentally as well as physically. The work has changed you fundamentally. You're not the person you were before you started this job. That person is gone, replaced by this tired, damaged, emotionally deadened version who can touch corpses without flinching, but can't remember how to laugh genuinely. The pride you occasionally feel in completing a difficult job, well, is the only positive emotion connected to your work. When you wrap a complex body perfectly, when the amulets are all positioned correctly, when the final product looks beautiful despite the awful process that created it, there's a moment of satisfaction. You made something eternal. You took chaos and death and decay and turned it into order and preservation and beauty. It's a real achievement. The moment passes quickly, buried under exhaustion and the knowledge that tomorrow you'll do it all again. But it exists. That tiny spark of craftsmanship pride is maybe the only thing keeping you from complete despair. You're good at this terrible job, That has to mean something. The relationship between precision and speed is the central tension of your work. You need to be precise to do the job correctly. You need to be fast to process enough bodies to make money. These requirements are often in direct conflict. Taking the time to do something perfectly means earning less. Rushing means making mistakes that cost you in penalties and reputation. You're constantly calculating the trade-off, trying to find the balance point between quality and efficiency. Sometimes you lean towards speed and accept that the result will be merely adequate rather than excellent. Sometimes you slow down and accept that you'll earn less that day. It's exhausting having to make these calculations constantly while also doing physically demanding work. Your brain is as tired as your body. The stories and gossip that circulate through the workshop are often dark and morbid, because that's the context of your work environment. Someone tells a story about a body that sat in the sun too long before arrival and was literally falling apart when they tried to move it. Someone else recounts the time a rat got into the storage area and chewed on a wrapped mummy. These stories are told with a mixture of horror and humour, the dark laughter of people who've seen too much. To an outsider, the conversations would be disturbing. To you, they're just workplace chat. You've been desensitized to the point where the macabre is mundane. This psychological adaptation is necessary for survival, but it's also alienating. You can't share these stories with anyone outside the workshop. They wouldn't understand. They'd be horrified. So you're isolated even in your social interactions. The physical space between you and other workers while you're all doing the same tasks creates a strange sense of solitude despite not being alone. You're working side by side with colleagues, but everyone is focused on their own body, their own task, lost in their own rhythm. There's no collaboration or conversation during the work itself. Just parallel processing, each person in their own world of misery. You glance over occasionally and see others bent over their tables, hands moving mechanically, faces blank. You probably look the same. A collection of individuals sharing space but not really together. The isolation is profound even in a crowded workshop. The dust that accumulates in your lungs is probably shortening your life significantly, but there's no way to avoid it. You're breathing air thick with salt particles, resin smoke, and general dust every day. Your lungs are coated with residue. You cough up grey and brown mucus every morning, your body trying desperately to clear itself. It never succeeds because you're re-exposed every day. The cumulative damage is building silently. Your lung capacity is probably reduced. Your risk of respiratory disease is probably sky high. But you can't think about it too much or you'll panic. You just accept that this work is killing you slowly and try not to dwell on the timeline. The treatment of workers who become injured or ill is callous and pragmatic. If you can't work, you're not useful. The workshop has no interest in supporting you through recovery. You're sent home and told to return when you're better. If you don't get better, someone else takes your position. There's always someone desperate enough to take a job in a mummification workshop. You're replaceable. The knowledge that your value is purely based on your current productivity is dehumanizing. You're not a person with intrinsic worth. You're a tool that performs a function. When the tool breaks, it's discarded and replaced. This reality makes every ache and pain terrifying. Any injury could mean the end of your livelihood. The sensory overload of the work environment means you're constantly being bombarded with unpleasant stimuli from multiple directions simultaneously. The smell is overwhelming. The heat is oppressive. The brightness of the sun causes headaches. The texture of the materials is unpleasant. The sounds are constant and grating. The taste of salt and resin is always in your mouth. every sense is being assaulted at once. Your nervous system is in constant distress. You can never fully relax because there's always something bothering you. Over time, this constant low-level torture wears down your mental resilience. You're always on edge, always irritated, always one small problem away from losing your composure entirely. The moments of black humor that emerge spontaneously are crucial for maintaining sanity. Someone makes a joke about a particularly difficult body, and everyone laughs harder than the joke deserves because you all need the release. The laughter is slightly hysterical, tinged with desperation, but it's genuine. For 30 seconds, you're not miserable workers in a corpse factory. You're just people laughing together. Then the moment passes and you return to work, but those brief respites are essential. Without them, the job would be completely unbearable instead of just mostly unbearable. The humor is dark and inappropriate and absolutely necessary. The distinction between the sacred and the profane has completely collapsed in your experience. You're performing religious rituals with unwashed hands while thinking about what you'll eat for dinner. You're muttering holy prayers while your back screams in pain, and you're mentally cursing the overseer. You're handling objects that are supposed to have magical protective properties while you're covered in sweat and grime and feeling like death yourself. The cognitive dissonance is constant. You're supposed to be facilitating someone's journey to eternal paradise while you're existing in a very earthly hell. The contradiction is so absurd that you've stopped even noticing it. Sacred and profane are just words. Everything is just work. The knowledge that you're essential but not valued is a source of constant low-grade resentment. Society needs mummy makers. The entire afterlife belief system depends on proper body preservation. You're performing a crucial function, but you're treated as expendable and kept in poverty. The disconnect between your importance to the system and your actual treatment within it is infuriating. You're making eternal life possible for other people while barely surviving yourself. The unfairness of it is staggering, but resentment doesn't change anything. The system doesn't care about fairness. It cares about function. You function, so the system continues unchanged. The physical layout of your workspace becomes so familiar that you could navigate it blind. You know exactly how many steps from the preparation table to the salt storage. You know where the tools are kept without looking. You know which floorboards are uneven. You know where the roof leaks when it rains. This familiarity is both comforting and depressing. Comforting because the routine requires no thought. Depressing because this terrible place is more familiar to you than your own home. You spend more time here than anywhere else. The workshop is essentially your life. Everything else is just the brief intervals between work shifts. The younger workers who show promise are sometimes taken under the wing of senior workers and given extra training. You were never one of those workers. You were competent but not exceptional, so you were left to figure things out on your own. Now, you're doing the same to the next generation. You're not mentoring anyone, you're just doing your job and letting them do theirs. Maybe it's petty, but you resent that you had to struggle alone, so you're not going out of your way to help others. The system breeds this kind of selfishness. When you're barely surviving, you don't have extra energy to lift others up. You're just trying to keep your own head above water. The gradual physical deterioration you're experiencing is like watching yourself age and fast forward. Your joints are stiff and painful in ways they shouldn't be at your age. Your hands shake slightly when you're tired, which is always. Your vision has gotten worse from years of working in dim light and bright sun without any protection. Your hearing is damaged from the constant noise of the workshop. Your teeth are worn down from the gritty diet and probably from grinding them in stress during sleep. You're falling apart piece by piece, and there's no maintenance or repair available. You just keep using your damaged body until it stops working entirely. The modern concept of preventative healthcare or treating chronic conditions doesn't exist. You have symptoms and problems, and you just live with them until they kill you. The weight of dead bodies has given you a very specific type of physical strength that's useless outside this profession. You can lift and maneuver an awkward, shifting weight in close quarters. You have grip strength and forearm endurance from wrapping linen for hours. Your back and legs are strong from standing and bending all day. But none of this strength translates to anything useful in other contexts. You're not strong in a general sense. You're strong in very specific ways that only matter in a mummification workshop. If you tried to do agricultural work or construction, you'd probably be terrible at it, because those require different strength and endurance. You've specialized your body for this one job, which has made you less adaptable and more trapped. The dreams you have about escaping this life are vague and unrealistic. You imagine living somewhere cool and quiet. You imagine work that doesn't involve corpses. You imagine having enough money to eat well and buy decent clothes. But you never imagine anything specific, because you don't actually know what else exists. Your world is so small. You've never traveled. You've never seen other cities or other ways of life. You don't know what options exist beyond the narrow range you've experienced. So your dreams of escape are just abstract wishes for something better, without any concrete vision of what that would look like. And they're completely unattainable anyway, so why waste energy imagining details? You're stuck here until you die. That's the reality you've accepted. The way time passes in the workshop is strange and non-linear. Hours feel like days when you're in the middle of a difficult task. Days feel like hours when you look back on them. Weeks blur together into an indistinguishable mass of repetitive work. You've lost track of how long you've been doing this job. 5 years? 7? 10? You genuinely don't remember. Time has become meaningless. There's only now, the current task, the current body, the current misery. The past is a fog. The future is unthinkable. You exist in an eternal present of unchanging labor. The modern concept of tracking time and marking progress doesn't apply to your life. You're not progressing toward anything. You're just continuing. The social isolation of your profession has made you awkward and uncomfortable in normal social situations. On the rare occasions when you're invited to some community gathering, you don't know how to act. You don't know what to talk about. You can't share stories from your work because they're too disturbing. You don't have hobbies or interests to discuss. You just stand there, silent and uncomfortable, smelling slightly off despite your best efforts to clean up. People make brief, polite conversation and then drift away. You're an outsider, even in your own community. The work has marked you permanently as different, other, untouchable in a social sense. You've given up trying to fit in. It's easier to just be alone. The physical transformation of a body from arrival to completion is dramatic and sometimes difficult to reconcile. The bloated, discoloured corpse that arrived bearing almost no resemblance to the serene, rapt figure you're presenting to the family looks like a completely different object. You've performed a kind of alchemy, turning organic decay into preserved permanence. The transformation is your doing, the result of your skill and labour, and there should be pride in that. But mostly you just feel tired. You've done this so many times that the miracle of it has worn off. It's just the expected outcome of following the procedure correctly. You hand over the finished mummy, accept the family's thanks mechanically, and move on to the next one. The moments when you're genuinely present and aware during the work are rare and usually unwelcome. Most of the time you're operating on autopilot, your mind elsewhere, your hands moving through practiced motions. But occasionally something snaps you into full awareness. A mistake, a surprise, an unusual difficulty. Suddenly you're fully conscious of what you're doing. You're touching a dead person, pulling their insides out, wrapping their dried flesh in cloth. The reality of it crashes into you, and for a moment you're horrified all over again, as if it's your first day. Then you push the awareness back down, return to autopilot, and continue. Those moments of clarity are awful. You prefer the numb routine. The cumulative effect of working with death every day has given you a strange perspective on your own mortality. You're not afraid of death in the way most people are. You've seen too much of it for it to remain scary. It's just a transition, a physical process like any other. Your body will stop working. Your flesh will decay unless someone preserves it, which they probably won't because you can't afford it. You'll return to the earth and be forgotten. This knowledge is oddly freeing. There's no mystery, no illusion. Death is just mechanics and chemistry. The fear has been replaced by a kind of acceptance that borders on indifference. You'll die when you die. Until then, you work. The institutional knowledge of the mummification process has been passed down through generations, and you're part of that chain. Someone taught you, and someday you might teach someone else, though you're not enthusiastic about it. The techniques have been refined over centuries into an efficient, reliable process. You're not innovating or creating. You're replicating what's been done thousands of times before. You're a link in a chain that stretches back into antiquity and will continue long after you're gone. There's something both comforting and depressing about being part of such a long tradition. You're connected to history, but you're also just another interchangeable worker in an endless succession of workers. The economic precariousness of your situation means you're always one disaster away from catastrophe. An injury, an illness, a dispute with the overseer. Any of these could end your employment and leave you destitute. There's no savings buffer. There's no family wealth to fall back on. There's just you and your ability to work, and the moment that fails, you're finished. This constant insecurity is exhausting. You can never relax. You can never feel safe. Every day you wake up knowing that you're one mistake away from losing everything. The stress is corrosive and constant. It's worn you down to a thin, brittle version of what you used to be. The rare moments of beauty in the work are usually found in the finished product rather than the process. A completed mummy, wrapped perfectly with clean white linen, painted mask serene and dignified, resting on a decorated board, genuinely looks like a work of art. The transformation from corpse to eternal resting form is complete. For a brief moment before the family takes it away, you can appreciate what you've created. It's beautiful in an austere, solemn way. Then it's gone, and you're back to the next decaying body. The beauty is momentary, and always followed by more ugliness. But those moments matter. They're the only evidence that your work has value beyond mere function.